This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This table is really tilted.
Excuse me?
Am I gonna get a chance to speak?
Maybe I should take that back.
Denied. Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Take a giant step for mankind.
Welcome to the Tilted Table with your hosts, Sean and Joe.
Time marches on there.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a great documentary. Folks, welcome to another episode of the Tilted Table, the internet's answer to a question that no one asked. I'm Sean Landon Clark.
And I am Joey Joe, the Fracky Mac.
And tonight we are going to talk about shitty jobs that we've had in our life. And boy, I have had a lot of shitty jobs.
I've definitely had some challenging ones. It was funny when we started talking about this in the beginning. It was like, you can't start with the job that you currently have.
Yeah, you can't start with the job you currently have. Worst job I ever had, the one I've had for the last 20 years.
Let's see. I would, I've had only a handful of them. Right out of college, I worked in at a finance company in a shitty strip mall that was smashed between a sun tanning place and a taekwondo studio. And it reminded me of so many like bad movies, as far as like low rent businesses. Yeah. When you first walk in, like there is like the mandatory like 8 cubicles.
Fuck.
And my very, it was my first job like right out of college, and my desk or my cubicle was in the back, smashed between a giant trash can that people would just like airball their like lunch plates into, and the water cooler. And if I needed to talk to somebody, I'd have to stick my or sit up from my chair like what is it, the lemur, or like those little desert cats that pop out of the hole.
Yeah.
And that was right on the heels of the movie Office Space, which you and I've talked a bunch about.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, man, this is literally hell. This is the most dead strip mall ever. And my job was calling people who had applied for credit 5 years prior and been declined, and ask if they wanted money. And it was telemarketing to get us motivated. The manager would walk around saying, all right, team, we're going to get into the afternoon phone zone. And after that, we're going to get into the evening sell-a-thon. And whoever makes the most phone calls and gets the most applications gets a pizza from Little Caesars.
Now we know where the character of Bill Lumbergh was designed after. Man. You know what's funny about that? When you just opened up that story and you're talking about where it was located, and people are like, well, I worked for a finance company. My first vision is some like sort of New York style skyscraper, right? And it's like, no, my office is like sandwiched between a Chinese buffet and a liquor store.
Yep.
It was. That's like extra depressing.
Oh man, when I'd have to, people would be like, oh, let me, I had to play the role of bill collector as well. And people would say like, well, where's your office at? And I'm like, I don't know that I would really call it an office. It's more of a cube. It's like, where the Taco Bell is at this corner? Yeah, we're like 50 yards from that Taco Bell.
Just look for the sign that says $1.89 40-ounce Old English Stage 100 bottles. We're right next door to that place.
I knew I had to pay my dues and show up. But as hard of a worker as I am, that job I would not put in more work. I would get to work 20 minutes early, and I would just sit in my parking spot out front of the building, or in the little strip mall, listening to gangster rap to hype myself up enough to get up the nerve to walk in at 5 minutes before my shift started. Wow.
So when how did you get paid? Did you have to I'm quote unquote get people to sign up for credit to make money, or would you get fired if you didn't sell so much of whatever it is you're trying?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there is definite quotas, and they're trying to get you to do shady stuff. They had us. The very first thing that they had us do is watch that movie Glengarry Glen Ross.
Okay, yeah.
And that basically they're like, this is a boiler room, and your job here is to call as many people and to sell them whatever it is that you need to do to hit these quotas. And yeah, it was shady.
Yeah, a lot of people's first jobs involve telemarketing or sales in some kind of way, and it sucks. That's why they're, entry-level jobs. Nobody really wants to do. Do you want to do this for 25, 30, 40 years?
No way.
But the sadder story is whoever was running the place, like that dude obviously had been there for a while, and now he's stuck.
That was his career.
Yeah. Oh, can I imagine that as a career? I honestly would rather just go homeless than do that as a career, for sure. I'd be like, no, I'm just not going to work. I'd rather, beg for money on the corner, hit the mission up for a free dinner.
Yeah, and I want to hear about your shitty job, but I'll leave you with this last funny thought. I mean, it was so soul sucking because you're talking to people about getting a 30% personal loan, and you're trying to sell them credit life insurance or credit disability insurance for an extra $10,000 on top of your $5,000 loan that you're getting, trying to rationalize why it makes sense. And, I would say that would be the one positive conversation of the day, quote unquote. Before that, there's 300 people calling you every name in the book and slamming the phone down, and all of the things that you would think would happen. And then you just be staring at the clock, waiting for your shift to be over and drag yourself out, put your key in your shitty Plymouth Breeze and go home.
Yeah. God, a Plymouth Breeze. Jesus Christ.
That was my car.
Yeah,
it was
right?
a Plymouth Breeze.
The bottom of it. You know what sucks is that today that job is even so much harder because most of those phone calls are perceived as being scams. So who the hell would take a cold call from an insurance, anybody, and buy a policy? Because most people, I think they would be thinking there's no real insurance policy on the other end. It's just a scam to take my money.
For sure.
So hard enough to do back in the 90s into the 2000s when at least people believed it was legitimate. It's I'm actually buying a policy or I'm getting some kind of thing from you that's real. Now it's got to be nearly impossible to cold call people and say, hey, I got insurance to sell. Yeah, right. You're gonna just scam me, and if I ever get hurt or I need that insurance, you're gone.
Yeah.
There was never a policy to begin with.
Yeah, it's that office space is now empty with a for lease sign out front.
For sure. Damn. Yeah, my first shitty job, again, and it's similar to yours, it involved sales. So at my first job, this job sucked. I was selling newspaper subscriptions door to door. And I was doing this when I was 16. It was I think it was the first job, first legitimate job. I mean, I did, going around the neighborhood and mowing lawns and crap like that. But, the actual first legitimate job that I had. And so we had to sell newspaper subscriptions door to door. And we got paid less than minimum wage because there was a commission involved. So they could pay us $3.65 an hour instead of, I think it was $4.25 at the time. And we had a quota. We had to sell, I think, 4 subscriptions a day. And so we'd go up to the door, knock on it. We had sample papers and whatnot. And we would try to get them to buy, I think it was a 6-month subscription. And it sucked, fuck you, door slammed in your face, and and of course it wasn't even just that. It was that there were other teenagers at these houses, and that was the worst thing because you were rolling up, hey, I got a newspaper subscription, like to sell you whatever pitch you're making, and if a teenager answered the door, it was just fucking just get trashed. It was just so bad. But one thing that was cool about the job, this was the only cool thing about the job. We didn't have to use any of our own vehicles. Of course, I was 16. I didn't have a car. We rode in a van. So we'd have to go meet at the newspaper headquarters, and they had a guy that would drive us around. We'd sit in a van and go to a neighborhood and just scour the neighborhood and go door to door and try to sell subscriptions. So one time when this was happening, they had a special offer, which was you would get, I think it was a month free or maybe 2 months free, and then if you like the paper, you can renew it. So that was the current offer. Suddenly, I'm actually selling subscriptions because people are taking the newspaper subscription for free for 2 months, and then if they don't want it, they can just cancel it.
Right.
So that day, I must have sold probably 15 subscriptions, and then of course that deal ends at some point, and it went on for a while. So we did this for maybe a week or two, and I was just knocking it out the park, and then they end that promotional gimmick. And I was right back to square one where it's I was lucky to get 1 or 2 people to buy into this. And we had to do 4 days. So I'm constantly getting heat from my boss. You got to do better. You got to sell, blah, 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 blah. So one day I was having a particularly rough day. I mean, I'm getting door slammed in my face, get the fuck off my property, the whole fucking 9 yards. I go up to a door and I'm like, hey, do you want, I want a subscription, and whatever pitch I had, and I said, you get 2 months for free. And that wasn't the case. It was a complete lie. And they sign up for it, did it again. And then, of course, I'm telling my friends that, we're all working together. I said, dude, I'm just telling them they get 2 months for free. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's working. So everyone in the fucking crew starts doing it. And it took about, I would say, maybe 3 months, 4 months maybe. And we get this fucking call to meet. And he's like, okay, there's an issue we're having. A bunch of people are claiming that they got free subscriptions and they're pissed off about their bill because they got billed, within a month or two. Right. And I'm like, have you been telling people that they get, 2 months free or whatever it was? I'm like, of course, that was a promotion. No, that promotion ended a long time ago. This is like more recent. And I'm like, I haven't said anything. Like, why would and I'm just, they're looking at us like maybe they misunderstood, So, yeah, I ended up quitting that job. Yeah, because I got a different job, but that was during high school. I was in a band at the time, so I took these jobs pretty lightly. The job you're talking about was right out of college, and by then I was actually headed into careers. I'm not going to say I worked in newspapers, so I was a reporter. That's a shitty job, but it's not shitty like the sales kind of shitty. Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's, it takes a special breed of cat that can put up with all of the door slamming or the phone slamming or the name calling. Like, you develop, I guess, a little bit of a thick skin, over a period of time, but just like jumping in a giant piranha tank with people and getting called names. And then you're like, oh, here's your $317 for the month. You're like, nah, man, I can't do this.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that it's a tough gig, and if you think about just the mental, kind of strain that it puts on you, that like, first of all, for me, I got to get out of this van, and I got to walk up and down streets, knock on doors, and this is it would have been like 90 or 91-ish. So, newspapers were still,
it's still a thing. Yeah.
And door to door wasn't completely off the table. These days, I can't imagine door to door. Who the fuck would do this? But still, that like, yeah, you have to knock on a door. I'm some stranger on your property, and my initial mindset was always, nobody really wants someone to come to their door and try to sell them something. No. And so at least luckily, the paper in our town is pretty big. It's well known. So it wasn't like I was trying to sell them some, dirt bag rag paper that nobody wants. But nonetheless, yeah, it's like I'm invading your personal time. For all I know, it's most of you folks just got off work. The last thing you want to do is have some asshole kid show up to your door and try to prompt you into signing a contract so you can get a newspaper. Right. That's mentally taxing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and hard, because even I didn't really like. I'm going from the perspective from their side. Like, I don't want someone coming to my door and trying to hawk newspaper subscriptions off to me. Yet here I am doing it to you. For sure. Yeah. There's a famous episode of Jerry Seinfeld when he gets a call from a telemarketer, and the guy's whatever's doing his pitch, and he's all, "Hey, can you give me your phone number and let me call you back when you get home?" And you can't hear what the guy says, and he goes, "Yeah, that's right, because nobody wants that shit to happen to him," and hangs up on the guy, right? So that's what I felt like.
100%, man. Well, during college, I always took summer school, but I worked on a construction crew. My dad had a construction or a commercial building that he was redoing, and I helped tear the whole building down. But then my main job was help when the concrete truck showed up for a couple of weeks. I was the low man on the totem pole. So my job, and this is up in Sacramento. It's July, August. It's 1,000 degrees outside, and my job on the concrete truck was I'm the dude with the wheelbarrow that stands at the back of the concrete truck and like fills it up and then runs the wheelbarrow over and then like back and forth and back and forth. And I'd have to take like salt tablets, to stay hydrated, and I got heat stroke a couple times. And then I remember when I got my paycheck, and it was something dumb like 200 net of taxes. It was like $200, for the time. Like, holy mackerel, I need to stay in college. There's no way. People would die out here being the wheelbarrow man.
How long did you do that for? Just a summer?
I would do it each summer. And so I'm halfway decent swinging a hammer.
Okay. Right, that's sweet. Well, you know, I did some construction. I didn't not like it. It's hard work.
It's very hard work. I got a lot of respect for all those people.
I didn't have to sell anybody 2x4s. I didn't have to cold call anybody and sell them cement.
Well, at least you can like start with something. At the end of the day, you can be like, "Oh, look, I did that."
Right? Yeah, you got some tangible, you know.
Yeah, and you got like some pride of ownership and maybe a little bit of craftsmanship in there, versus all the other scenarios that we just painted.
Mm-hmm. Another shitty job that I had is when I was living in LA and I was down there, trying to be a rock star. So we couldn't really work 9-to-5 jobs. We would play gigs at night and we got paid to do our gigs, but it wasn't a lot of money. And we were living in a warehouse at the time. And I don't know if I've talked about this before, but we went down there and it was 5 of us and we had cash. And again, we were 18 years old. We had 0 credit and found this shitty apartment complex that would rent to us just because we had enough cash to give them first and last month's rent and move into a studio apartment, 5 dudes with musical equipment, drum set.
Wow. In a studio apartment?
In a studio fucking apartment.
What did you guys like sleep on top of each other?
Literally just, everything was shoved up against, we had no furniture, so everything shoved up against the walls, all the equipment. And
you have sleeping bags?
We had sleeping bags. And that lasted maybe about 4 months. And so part of that deal was we all had to get some kind of work so we could, pay bills and get a practice space because we couldn't practice obviously in the studio apartment. So we'd all do day labor jobs and we just go down to these places and you would walk in and say, I'm available to work. And if you fit some kind of job description, they would send you out. And of course we didn't have any skills outside of we were physically capable of doing construction. So a lot of the jobs were construction. So we eventually moved into we got a practice space inside of this warehouse, and it was an old abandoned warehouse that the landlord had partitioned off a bunch of spaces, and they were like little practice rooms. So you could set up your band in there, and we learned pretty quick that a lot of the band members just never left the warehouse. They slept in the warehouse, slept in their practice room, and there were like these sofas and shit spun around, so it was like kind of a party area.
Okay.
And there was a shower in this place. I don't know if it was like a detox shower. God knows what this warehouse was. I'm probably gonna have cancer in a couple of years. But you could and there was it was an open shower. There wasn't like there were any curtains or rods.
It was like a hose?
No, it was like a regular shower. It just had like a pull string. It was like a prison shower. There was no wall, right? It's just like an open shower. And dudes that lived there, no one gave a fuck. They would literally just be bald ass naked, just taking a shower. Hey, what's going on, guys? Right? They didn't give a damn. Same with me. I'm we're gonna stay here. So we were able to get out of that studio apartment. So anyways, so we're living in this warehouse and we're doing these day labor jobs. So I go down to I can't remember the name. It was Jobs Now or some bullshit like that. And I got on this cleaning crew. And and I did this for a while because they hired me on and said, this is what we do. We want to hire you on. We had to go, we had contracts with a bunch of liquor stores and restaurants to go clean their restrooms. So, you just go from one place to the next. And I'm not going to lie to you. And you're in Hollywood, the fucking every place we went were these low budget, dirty ass liquor stores, low rent restaurants.
Yeah, like broken needles and everything.
Dude, the bathrooms were fucking disgusting. And that was a hard job because you go in there and it's you would do let's say in a given day, you would do maybe 10 bathrooms. It was a crew of 2, right? So you go in there, out of 10 bathrooms, maybe 1 was not so bad. It was pretty easy to clean. It wasn't, too fucked up. But every other one,
like a hazmat suit and a blowtorch.
I mean, the stuff that comes out of people's bodies that they don't flush or they clog shit up with, what's on the floors? Oh my God, disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. It was one point where I couldn't get the smell out of my nostrils. I'd leave that place and still smell those bathrooms. And you can imagine what they smelled like. Yeah, and you're talking about junkies up in that place. Yeah, needles and shit like that. Fuck yeah. All the time. And
did you get to learn a lot about those little those round cakes that they put in the urinal?
Yeah, I did. I actually learned how those things work. They don't.
Well, it's funny as we talk about, not to go down this rabbit trail, but when I know I'm in a really nice restaurant when they fill the urinal with ice.
Yeah, that's a classy spot.
That's
somebody that came in with their drink and they were done with it and they just dumped it in the urinal. Fucking assholes.
Yeah. Oh man, that is like no pun on a shitty job. That is pretty terrible, especially like where it's at. Yeah, I can't even imagine because all of those buildings are going to be old. The bathrooms are going to be old. Everything's old. Everything's gross, run down, and then you throw all the nonsense of people's filth on top of it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is like a couple of the places that we did were like independent restaurants that were once a franchise of some sort. So you're rolling up to like a Taco Bell, but clearly it was like an old Taco Bell, but now it's some independent
Right.
fajita fiesta place or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, this is before I think people were really tight on, like customers only type into the bathroom. And when you're in LA, especially the Hollywood area, there's just so much foot traffic. People walk into those places and they'll go into the bathroom. And a lot of times it's legitimate. They're going in there because they got to go to the restroom. But a lot of it just fucking weirdos and drug addicts and shitheads. And they just fuck those places up. And they wouldn't give a rat's ass leaving that place in absolute shambles.
Did they at least pay you like an unmarked bills or gold bars or something?
No. They paid by check. I had to pay taxes on that shit.
Literally. Ugh. That's bad.
So I did that maybe for 6 months. At first, it didn't really bother me. I don't think, I'm trying to go by my memory, but it was steady money, and I was doing okay. The rent at the jam room I think was $300 a month, so it was split between 5 people. And I can't remember what I was clearing a month. It was, if I had to guess, it was like maybe $1,500 a month.
Okay.
And so it wasn't too bad considering my rent was like, less than $100.
Well, at least you have like good memories of that time of your life.
Oh, no, it was totally fun. And we made money gigging when we would play a show. So we would play 3 nights a week, usually sometimes 4, but we were starting out. So we didn't get the weekend, gigs. And so, yeah, you're making.
You got like the Tuesday night.
Yeah. And so you get like a cut of the door. And that's the low budget way of doing it. Eventually, it became the pay to play system where you had to buy your tickets and then you sold your own tickets. So you have to pay the club, let's say, $500, and you have to sell your tickets to make that $500.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but it was it was a good time. It was fun. I just remember that job in particular because I remember it was easy. It didn't require any kind of mental stress. I didn't have to think about anything. It was. And when you're stressing out on, what you really want to be a musician, and I'm trying to get these gigs, and we're constantly hitting up clubs, and we're trying to partner with other bands that are, just a bit, more popular than us. Let's play together. And you're doing all that.
Right.
That was my real job. And that to me required more mental acuity. Walking into a bathroom and unclogging 5 pounds of shit that's spilling over a toilet required zero mental mental ability.
Man.
But yeah, I did that for about 6 months, and then I did quit. And I had a problem with the boss, and then I ultimately went back to doing like day labor, just here and there. Yeah,
that's good, man. All part of your journey and what made you who you are today.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Leave a like on the video. I know you're enjoying this. Can you shut up?
The internet's answer to a question that was never asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
So I won't say this was like a terrible job, and this is like during high school, is we lived way out in the middle of nowhere. And there was a gentleman that lived, I don't know, like a half a mile away that had, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a nursery, and he was a professor at a university. And so my job, which I was actually thankful for, was to hand water every plant and tree that was in this nursery. And I remember when, I forget his name was like Mr. Tuma, or Professor Tuma, I think that's what it was. But it took me 5 hours each day. I'm sorry, every other day. And so what I would do is, one of the reasons that I think I'm pretty good with like on music during that time period is I had this little boom box, and I would, we're in the middle of nowhere, and I'm the only person in the nursery. And so I just dragged this boom box with me throughout the nursery. But there's nothing quite as boring as, being alone like that for hours and hours at a time. And all you're doing is moving the hose from this pot to that pot. This, and like, I think I did that for almost maybe a year and a half or so. But yeah, that was, I want to say, let's just again, not shitty. Let's use the word dull. That was a really dull, brain dead type job. But 103.7, the Fox. That's what I would listen to all the time.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, I this is so funny because my next job is about me working at a flower shop. So
there we go.
All right, so we're right on par with the same kind of stuff.
But yours is like the fancy plants. I was just in the dirt.
When you hear this story, it's not that fancy. I worked for a flower shop, and this was right when I came back from Los Angeles. I think was it? No, it had to be. Yeah, it had to be right when I came back from LA. I didn't work there that long. So the flower shop was known as being a place where you could get a dozen roses a lot cheaper than other flower shops, and there was a reason for this. So what the owner did was he had the flowers directly shipped from the farm, like they're literally picked and then boxed and then shipped to his shop. And my job was to run this machine. It was like these spinning wheels with little rubber pegs on them.
Okay.
And it's like gears, that go into each other. And you would have to take the roses and shove the stems in to strip off all the thorns and leaves, right?
Okay.
And then you would have to put it in a bucket with water and sugar. Apparently this makes them last longer. Then we had to put it in this big refrigerator. And it was very much like it was brain dead kind of work. So this damn truck would pull up, and this is where I got fired. Was we had a 4-hour shift, I think, so it was part time, and I can't remember the days. It wasn't every day. It was like maybe Friday. It had to be on a Friday because I remember complaining about how like I had plans and to go out, right? Like it's a 4-hour shift. Who cares? 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock or something like that, and then I'm out by 8. But the trucks that would pull up. Initially, the trucks were not diesel. I would describe them as like kind of like U-Haul trucks.
Okay.
So
yeah.
And,
like a big box truck.
Yeah, and you're pulling these boxes off, and it was me and a friend of mine, and get them, and you just start the process. You're just shoving them, and then you're filling up these buckets with water and sugar, and you put them in there, and take them to the fridge. And it started out as a smaller U-Haul, kind of slightly larger U-Haul. Fucking diesel trucks eventually start showing up, and it was just more and more fucking roses that we had to strip, and we had no overtime. It's just like, you're going to do all of this in 4 hours, and it got to the point where it's just like
physically impossible. Yeah,
like I'm working until 8:15. Who gives a shit? Okay, whatever. Then it was 8:30, then 8:45, then 9:15, and at a point I'm going to the guy who ran the shop, and he was a total shyster, fucking dickhead, business owner. And he's like, oh, that's the job. You got to get it done. And I'm like, dude, you keep adding more fucking boxes of roses. You can't get it done. And he's like, well, that's on you. And I told him, I threatened him. I said, well, I'll see what the labor board has to say about this, because I got a lot of overtime and you ain't paying shit. And so
what did he say?
No, he just like, whatever. He just kind of blew me off. And then I went home that night, and one of the guys that worked at the flower shop, he was a designer, I guess a florist or whatever. He was a big pothead, and at the time I was selling weed. So he rolls over to my house and comes over. He's like, oh, can I get a bag, whatever. He buys it. I'll never forget this. He's like, oh, yeah, by the way, Dave told me to tell you not to come back to work. You're fired.
But that's like, did you chalk that up as a mercy kill? Like, man, I hated that job anyway.
Oh, yeah, I didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I liked the job simply because I was going to school at the time. And it was, again, it was a job that required zero mental, acuity. I didn't need to think about anything. It was easy. And when you got 4 classes and you got all these papers to write and all this homework to do, I didn't want a job that required me to think too much, because I'm already thinking for 5-6 hours a day in school and trying to get all this work done. I wanted jobs that were mindless. Yeah, it required zero mental ability. You didn't have to think about anything. Just open a box, grab the fucking stack, shove it in the machine, strip it down, put it in the bucket. Grab another one, do it, repeat thousands of times that it felt like every night.
Man, just monotony.
Yeah. So, any other shitty jobs for you?
I think that's it, man. I wouldn't call it shitty. When I started when I was 12, I bought my very first chainsaw.
That sounds like a fun activity.
It was great. My dad actually took me to the Stihl, STIHL, the Stihl dealership, And it was funny because I walked in and I pointed. I knew exactly which chainsaw to get. I knew exactly what weed eater to get. And again, we lived way out in the middle of nowhere, and I had my own basically like little clear cutting business. And I think I did a great job. And, you know, for the neighbors, it was like, you know, you could pay this kid next, you know, a couple houses down, you know, $3 an hour or something, where you're paying, you know, thousands of dollars somewhere else. So it was great. I mean, I at that age, I was making really good money, and I was homeschooled. So I would get my schoolwork was basically done by 10 in the morning.
Oh, cool.
And then I'd throw my headphones on, I'd load up the truck, and I mean, shoot, I started driving when I was 13. And again, you know, when you live in the middle of nowhere, like who's gonna stop you on the road type of a thing. So I'd load up the truck and I'd head to whatever job it was and unload all the gear, and I'd spend the rest of the day clear cutting land. And going back to the whole music thing, do you remember those headphones that had like that little wire band that went over your head?
Yeah, I had those.
Yeah, so I would take a pair of wire cutters and I would like snip the ear buds with those like the big foam fluffy things across them, and I would put those in my ear protection, like I had like studio earphones.
Okay, yeah.
And then I would plug it into my Walkman in my body glove fanny pack.
Oh my God.
and yeah, dude, I would let it rip. So yeah, going back to, you know, why such a big music person. I mean, music's always been a big part of my life.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Again, I wouldn't call that a shitty job. I think it was pretty entrepreneurial at 12 years old to be doing that.
Yeah, actually, it sounds like a pretty sweet gig. I mean, you got to consider yourself somewhat lucky. I've had a lot of shitty jobs, but I think that's partially because for at least the ages of about, well, when you start working, generally about 16, when you first can like legally work, all the way to 26-ish, 27-ish, when I graduated, you know, college, I worked a lot of part-time, and it was just whatever I could get my hands on so I can pay the rent. And I never expected to keep a job all that long, just long enough to get me to the next job, you know, because all the jobs were, you know, really crappy for the most part. But I did go on a lot of job interviews that, you know, you read like an ad in the paper or whatever, and it's like, oh, and you go apply, and when you do the interview, you realize that it's completely like the worst thing ever, and what was described in the ad is not really what the job was. I went on a lot of those interviews where you're like literally in the middle of the interview, I'm like, dude, I'm out of here. I won't even complete this. Like, you know, this is bullshit. And one of them was, I saw an ad for carpet cleaners. Okay. And I was just like, oh, this, you know, cool. It's like no experience necessary, you know, cleaning carpets. So I call them up. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm interested. And they're like, yeah. So it was for, I can't remember the name of the company. It doesn't matter. So he's like, you know, we have these vacuums, and they're like these amazing, you know, it's like not just a vacuum for dry. It's, you know, can actually, you know, steam clean the carpets. It's, you know, multi-use device. And what you do is you go and you clean carpets. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I go to the job interview, right? And all of a sudden they're asking me about, you know, my sales experience or if I've ever done. I'm like, sales? I'm here to clean fucking carpets, right? Right. So what the job ends up being, what you find out it is that you're not cleaning carpets. You're going to people's houses and offering. Oh,
is this the vacuum deal?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
the door-to-door vacuum salesman.
Yeah, door-to-door is basically what it is. And I'm just like, you motherfuckers, you know, I came here to clean carpets, not fucking to hawk fucking, you know, vacuum cleaners off on people. But yeah, that's how they got you into the interview, was the idea that like, well, what you're supposed to do is go door to door and like, let me show you this vacuum. I'll go in your house and I'm going to clean your carpet for you.
This is
demonstrate it, and then you try to sell it to them.
Right? Yeah, 20 years ago, that happened to us, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Come out and clean the carpet. And then we actually, I forget the name of that vacuum cleaner.
It's a major fucking brand. Like they're like, they're legit vacuums.
Oh yeah, it was like $1,000.
Yeah, they're legit vacuums, which I found interesting because they had such a great reputation. Like, why would you try to sell it like this? You know, you got a really good product, and really good products sell themselves. Right. Like, what do I have to go do? But I get it. They're trying to make as many sales as possible. I have no doubt that vacuum was readily available in your local Montgomery Wards and Sears, these stores that are long gone now, right? But yeah, but that's just another way that they could, you know, probably pay somebody basically nothing. It's, you know, I don't know if it was any kind of salary, if it was all commission.
No, I'm sure it was all commission.
Right? That they could like, well, what do we really have to lose? We might make some vacuum sales by having these jackasses go door to door and clean carpets and then try to,
Kirby. That's what it was.
Kirby. That's
Kirby
right. It's
vacuums.
Kirby vacuums.
Yeah. And it was fun. I mean, so I remember I bought it because I was like, man, this is the person was doing, like, I think they spilled like baking soda purposely on our floor.
Yeah, you throw something on there that's
and they're like, oh, see how this cleans it up. And then I remember thinking, like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Here, let me grab my checkbook. I think I used it like, I don't even know, maybe 3 months, and then I gave it to the neighbor across the street, and I went and bought a Dyson. Doesn't just come out, but talk about a shitty job.
Right.
Yeah, door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesperson.
Yeah, and I had a lot of interviews like that, and they were all sales jobs, but the way they would pitch them in the ads to get people to come in was that it was something else, and then you get the job interview, and you're like, oh, this is a fucking stupid-ass fucking sales job. I had something similar with telemarketing. It was appointment setting. That's what it was. They did the same. I can't believe I fell for this.
Oh, well, yeah. I had the same thing.
Yeah. So, it's like they call you. It's like they need people to help set appointments. Just call people and set appointments. I mean, it sounded like, again, mindless kind of work I want to do. I don't have to do a whole lot of thinking. And so I'd go there, and what you find out is that, it's appointment setting, but you're trying to set an appointment to sell them something.
Right.
And it was like, I remember the script. It was weird. It was like you cold call people and say, I'm so-and-so from whatever company, and you just won whatever prize it was. And it's some stupid prize, and we want to, come down and give it to you and like to set the appointment. But the prize is, okay, yeah, I'll take the widget, whatever the widget is. And then, of course, it was a pitch to sell whatever it is that they were selling. And I can't remember what the fuck they were selling. Yeah. And I did that for about... maybe I was in that interview for like maybe 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, this is just another fucking bullshit sales job. Nah, I'm doing this shit.
I'm out.
Fuck that.
Yeah. I had something a little bit similar to the whole appointment setting thing. This is like back in 2001. And like monster.com, like the jobs website was big. And so it was like the way that the art, it was like an early internet advertisement, and I showed up, and it was like over in like Menlo Park, I think. Okay. And I just remember they were like, oh yeah, your job is to call people and to find them, basically like a recruiter, an early .com era. Okay, yeah. Like Netscape was still around and all that kind of stuff. But then I realized, like, as I'm sitting there in the interview listening to this lady, I'll just say talk at me. Then I realized, wait a second, this is just another telemarketing job. Yeah. Good gravy. Why? It's like literally the only interviews I could get in was basically telemarketing. So yeah. That one never worked out for me, but that was one I never wanted to.
Yeah, it's interesting because in 2001, I was in the Bay Area, and I was working for the Oakland Tribune, and that job paid low. And again, newspapers were starting to die, and they were losing, funds, and they were firing people, so they paid really low. And so the .com thing's exploding, and all these .coms are popping up, and they're offering all these jobs for, like website writers and things like that. And I remember going to an interview, and I can't remember the name of the fucking .com. They no longer exist. And I go in there, and I'm like, yeah, I work for the Oakland Tribune. I'm dropping all my fucking experience. I got my education now. I'm killing it. I'm getting them samples of all the shit I wrote and all this kind of stuff. And I had my major was mass comm and journalism, and you could choose an emphasis. And it would be like, reporting, broadcast journalism, public relations, and one of them was advertising. So I majored in print journalism, which, again, I probably should have been smarter majoring in something that was basically becoming a dinosaur. But I had taken a bunch of advertising classes. So I actually had at least that kind of experience, too, how to write that kind of style. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, like, I'm so gravy. And sitting there, and these young guys, they couldn't have been any older than me. So at the time, I'm probably like 25, 26. And these guys own the company or run the company. They're basically my age. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. And they seem impressed. So I get up to leave, and I walk out, outside of the office, and there's one other person sitting there waiting for their interview. And it's this absolutely fucking drop dead gorgeous brunette, like stunningly beautiful. And so I see her sitting there. I don't know that she's there for the interview. And the guy sticks out his head and calls out her name, and she stands up. And I'm like, oh, fuck. They're going to hire her. I'll get dead in the water. Never got a call back.
Oh yeah, and that's one of those.
Didn't even get a rejection letter.
Even if you wanted to, like, I probably should do the right thing and follow up, and maybe is there any other questions, and maybe they're waiting for that eagerness or whatever. Like that's when no, that deal was dead.
Yeah. That was one experience. I had a similar experience at Washington. I think it was called Washington Hospital. They needed a PR person, and generally speaking, in my experience, PR people, females are generally what companies want because they're less likely to get attacked by reporters. Because again, it's a woman. Again, this is early 2000s. And of course, a pretty face versus, and I mean, I'm a good-looking guy, but I'm not as pretty as a pretty girl. So I remember going into that interview, and I knew the guy that was hiring, and I went back to my job, and it was maybe 2 weeks after I interviewed. One of the female reporters got hired for that position. This girl Caitlin, and she was really pretty. And I'm like, I didn't know she even interviewed. So I'm just
probably
like,
didn't.
Well, she did, but they're gonna take her. I mean, we're pretty much on par with each other. We both work for the same goddamn paper. We had similar experience, and then of course, I get a call saying, hey, Sean, thanks for the the interview, but we decided we're gonna go a different direction. Oh, okay, cool. And that was like maybe 2 days later. It's like Caitlin had put in her 2-week notice, and I'm like, what happened? Oh, I got the job at Washington Hospital. I'm like, fucking shit.
That's the way the world spins, man.
That's the way it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I have an important announcement for you, so stay tuned.
Yo, that's some next level shit, bruh. So you got me. Big deal.
The internet's answer to a question no one asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Tilted Table, the internet's answer to a question that no one asked. I'm Sean Landon Clark.
And I am Joey Joe, the Fraggy Mac.
And we're going to make some calls and try to sell some shit, namely this podcast, and that would be at Tilted Table 1 on all major platforms.
Like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go dig a ditch and fill it back in.
Yep. Peace.